Have you ever stepped into an elevator, heard the door shut, and for 1 second thought the exact same thing almost every person on this planet has thought? What if this thing falls? You've probably never told anyone that. Maybe you even laughed it off. But it only takes one small jolt, one strange sound, the cabin taking half a second longer than usual, and that question comes right back. Here's the strange part. That fear is way older than you'd guess. And it's not silly. Because for centuries, rising dozens of feet inside a metal box hanging from a rope sounded like pure insanity. But here's the weirdest part of all. Today you walk into elevators without a second thought. At work, at the mall, at the hospital, at a hotel, in your own building. You hand your life over to a multi-ton machine and you don't even look at it. And maybe that automatic trust is the biggest clue that something is hidden in there. Because if you knew everything that actually happens behind that steel door, you'd never look at an elevator the same way again. Not because they're dangerous. Because they're way smarter than anyone gives them credit for. If you like finding out what's hiding inside the most ordinary things on Earth, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Because what's coming next turns one of humanity's oldest fears into one of engineering's greatest wins. You press the button. The door shuts. A few seconds later, it opens on exactly the right floor. It's so simple that nobody ever stops to think about what just happened. But behind that boring little routine, dozens of parts are working together for one single reason. Keeping that box from dropping. And that's a lot harder than it sounds. For thousands of years, buildings stayed short. Not for lack of ambition. For one simple limit. Stairs. The more floors a building had, the fewer people wanted to live up top. In practice, the highest floor was the cheapest one, because it was the most exhausting to reach. That started to change once the first rope and pulley systems showed up to haul loads. Except those systems carried sacks, crates, materials. Not people. And the reason was simple. If the rope snapped, everything went down with it. Nobody thought it was reasonable to bet their life on one stretched piece of rope. That's how cities grew sideways instead of upward, for way longer than they should have. Until one man decided to challenge that exact fear. Elisha Otis. And here's the detail almost nobody knows. Otis didn't invent the elevator. Elevators had already existed for decades. What he invented was something far more important. A way to stop them from killing the people riding inside. In 1854, at a major fair in New York, he decided to prove it live. No blueprint. No speech. He climbed onto a platform hanging from a single rope, in front of a crowd, and gave an order that sounded insane. He told them to cut the rope. The crowd held their breath. The platform dropped. But it only fell about a foot, and locked in place. Otis stayed standing. Without a scratch. And according to the accounts from that day, he simply looked at the crowd and said, quote, "All safe, gentlemen. All safe," unquote. In that instant, thousands of people understood that maybe it really was possible to trust their lives to a machine like that. And that single demonstration paved the way for every skyscraper we know today. But there's a common mistake about this story. A lot of people think that brakes solved the problem for good. In reality, it was just the first step. Because what keeps a modern elevator from falling isn't one part. It's an entire system. And that's exactly where most people get it wrong. But I promise you, there's something hidden here almost nobody ever told you about. When you look at an elevator, it seems like there's one single thing holding that cabin up. The cable. And if that cable snapped, you'd assume it's over. Except that picture is wrong. Because in real engineering, the cable is almost never the most critical part of the entire system. Start with the number. In most modern elevators, the cabin isn't held by one cable. It's held by several, working at the same time. Depending on the building, 4, 6, 8, or more. And each one is built with a ridiculous safety margin. A single cable on its own could already hold way more weight than the cabin ever demands on a normal day. That means something simple. Even if one cable snapped, the cabin wouldn't drop. The others carry the weight while the system figures out something went wrong. And there's another detail that explains why they almost never snap in the first place. Those cables aren't solid steel rods. They're built from dozens, sometimes hundreds, of thin wires braided together. If one wire wears down, the rest keep holding. On top of that, technicians inspect these cables on a regular schedule, hunting for corrosion and where invisible to the naked eye. In practice, a cable almost always gets replaced long before it becomes any real risk. But there's an even more decisive part, and it's basically invisible to you. The counterweight. It sits hidden inside the elevator shaft, on the opposite side of the cabin, constantly pulling downward. Picture a seesaw. When both sides carry similar weight, one small push moves the whole thing. That's exactly what's happening in there. The counterweight weighs roughly the same as the empty cabin plus a portion of the expected passenger load. The result? The motor doesn't have to lift the entire cabin. It only balances out the difference between the two sides. That's not just clever engineering. It's the reason elevators burn so little energy, wear down fewer parts, and last for decades. And here's another myth. A lot of people think the motor holds the elevator in place the whole time. It doesn't. Most of that work is already covered by the counterweight. The motor's only job is deciding who goes up and who goes down. Which brings us to the next question. If the motor isn't holding the cabin, what happens the moment it just stops? The answer surprises almost everyone. Because the elevator doesn't depend on the motor to stay still. It's the opposite. The brakes are locked by default. They only release when the system decides to move the cabin. In other words, with power, the motor controls the movement. Without power, the brakes snap right back to their safe position on their own. That's why the classic movie scene, an elevator plunging in the middle of a blackout, almost never happens in real life. In most modern buildings, the elevator simply stops. Backup batteries usually walk the cabin slowly to the nearest floor, so you can step out on your own 2 feet. But maybe the most fascinating part of all is the one nobody ever sees working. The speed governor. Despite the name, it doesn't speed anything up. It watches. For the entire ride, it tracks the cabin speed in real time. As long as everything stays within range, it stays silent. But the second it detects abnormal acceleration, everything changes in a fraction of a second. It triggers, mechanically, no computer, no operator, a system that grips the cabin directly onto the steel rails it rides on. It's not the motor locking things down. It's not wheels. It's metal jaws closing with enough force to grab tons of moving steel and stop it cold. And the most impressive part? This works even if the power goes out. Even if everything else fails. Because this mechanism was built for exactly one purpose. Working when everything else stops working. Cables. Counterweight. Motor. Brakes. Governor. Sensors. Doors. Controllers. It's not luck, it's not chance, it's engineering stacked in layers, each one watching the layer before it, each one ready to take over the moment another one fails. So why, even knowing all that, do you still feel that little chill when the door shuts? There's a piece of advice that's been floating around for decades. If the elevator starts to fall, jump right before impact. It sounds logical. If you leap upward the exact instant the cabin hits the floor, your speed relative to the ground would drop. Except that idea works a lot better on paper than in real life. You'd need to nail the exact moment of impact, not a second early, not half a second early, fractions of a second smaller than the time your own brain takes just to register that something's happening. By the time you notice the impact, it would already be over. And the push you get from a normal jump is way too small compared to the speed a real free fall would reach. In practice, you'd have a much better chance of losing your balance and getting hurt some other way than actually saving yourself by jumping. There's also the idea of lying flat on your back on the cabin floor to spread the impact across your body. The same principle as a mattress spreading your weight better than a wooden board. It makes sense on paper. But there are no real studies confirming it changes the outcome in an actual accident. And the reason is simple. Complete free falls in modern elevators are so rare that there's barely any data to scientifically test what the ideal position would even be. That's why the people who work on this stopped asking, "How do you survive the fall?" and started asking something else entirely. Why does the fall almost never happen in the first place? After Otis's demonstration, the whole world entered a race. Taller buildings demanded faster elevators, bigger cabins, stronger motors. And scaling all of that up meant scaling up the risk right along with it. That's where a rule was born, one that shows up today in airplanes, nuclear plants, high-speed trains, and elevators alike. No single part can ever be responsible for someone's life. That's why, before an elevator carries its first passenger, it goes through a massive round of testing. Brakes, doors, motors, sensors, cables, electrical systems, everything has to work together. And even after it's installed, it keeps testing itself, quietly, around the clock. That explains the scene that annoys everyone. You step in, the door closes, and the elevator just sits there. It feels like a malfunction. Most of the time, it's the opposite. A door that didn't fully latch, a misaligned sensor, a load over the limit, and the system locks everything on purpose. To the passenger, it looks like a problem. To the equipment, it means the safety system is doing exactly what it's supposed to. And there's another obstacle almost nobody thinks about: the weight of the cable itself. A 30-foot rope weighs almost nothing. A rope stretching a mile weighs tons all on its own. At a certain point, most of the effort stops being about holding up the cabin and starts being about holding up the cable. That's why, for more than 100 years, there was an invisible ceiling on how tall a building could get, and it had nothing to do with a lack of technology. It was pure gravity. That limit is what pushed engineers toward a new generation of materials. In some of the tallest buildings on the planet, steel cables have already been swapped out for composite fiber belts, way lighter, more durable, with less vibration and less energy burned. And once that looked like the final answer, engineers asked an even bigger question. What if the cable just stopped existing altogether? Today, experimental elevators already move with zero cables, using linear motors, the same technology behind magnetic levitation trains. These cabins can go up, go down, and even move sideways, sharing the same shaft with other cabins at the same time. And there's one more layer almost nobody imagines exists. Modern elevators, especially in hospitals, hotels, and corporate buildings, spend all day quietly gathering data on themselves. How many trips they've made, how long each door took to close, how much strain the motor was under, tiny shifts in vibration and temperature. That monitoring catches signs of wear long before any part comes anywhere near failing. It's almost like the elevator is telling someone, every single day, something isn't quite right, long before you'd ever notice a thing. Maybe that's exactly why serious elevator accidents stay incredibly rare, as long as the equipment gets proper maintenance. But even knowing all of this, most people still feel a small twinge of unease stepping into an elevator. And that's not because they know the risks. It's because they can't see what's protecting them. On a plane, you can see the wing. In a car, you see the wheel, the driver, the tires. In an elevator, almost everything is hidden behind the wall. Motor, cables, brakes, counterweight, sensors, controllers. You step into a sealed box and you simply trust it. And maybe that quiet trust is one of the greatest engineering achievements of modern life. Millions of people do it every single day without thinking, without looking, without ever picturing how much technology is working hidden behind that steel door. So next time an elevator door closes right in front of you, remember, that little chill you feel isn't you doubting the machine. It's you not seeing just how many layers of protection are working for you, silently, all the time. If you liked seeing what was hiding in plain sight, subscribe to the channel, because from now on, you won't look at ordinary things the same way again.